And we are live. Welcome to everyone in crypto land. Well, morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you're at. Um, I am very, very, very pleased to be able to introduce someone that I just met. And I look forward to learning from him. And hopefully, we can learn something from each other. And I believe that Don has a breadth of experience. Um, he's a little older, like I am. So, Don, would you like to introduce yourself and give everybody a snapshot of your background?
Wow, that's a big question right there. I generally don't like to talk about myself too much because it gets really complex. uh, I'm a very unusual person, um, and the reason why is because there's some people that are somewhat normal, if you will, and there's other people that kind of grasp things that other people don't grasp, if you will. So, I, for instance, reincarnation, that kind of stuff. Some people and spirituality. So I'm this very deeply spiritual person, but it's not about beliefs. It's about knowing, which is really weird. It's hard to explain kind of who I am without kind of that background. I don't like to talk about it too much when I do podcasts, but this is a debate, so I can go into it a little bit so people can understand why I understand Bitcoin. Um, so I know that I'm a soul in a human body, which is weird, right? So most people are like believe that. I know it for a fact, which is odd. So I'm odd in that regard. So I understand reality, which is weird. I've been waiting for humanity to wake up. So what I do is I'm waiting for the truth to be released to humanity. So what the truth is that there's only one consciousness, and we're all sharing it. And so that's the truth. And is I'm waiting for people to figure that out. So I come from that. That's where I kind of come from that kind of spiritual side. So I started doing that stuff in 1989. And I got into gold mining in the 1990s because my metaphysical research led me to understand that the American era was going to end in our lifetime. And we're experiencing it. So if I knew if the American era was ending, that means the dollar was in big trouble, the US government's debt was in big trouble, and that the one winner was going to be gold. So I started investing in gold in the 90s, and then I started investing in junior miners in 2004, and that's all I invested in. And so from 2004 until now, I've just been investing in gold and silver miners. And then I wrote my own book. I became an expert on the subject. I'm one of the experts in gold and silver mining stocks, and this all came from basically spirituality, believe it or not, knowing that America was coming to an end. So I'm a type A personality, and I worked in IT for 20 years, and that's how I got into Bitcoin. So um, in the 2000s, I was just investing only in mining stocks, and then Bitcoin came around in 2010, and I ignored it. I basically said, you can't make private money. So my mentality from 2010, when it came out, to 2016 was that Bitcoin is just a hoax. It's a bunch of BS. You can't make private money. And I was in IT. And then in 2016, it went to $1,000. And I said, whoa, maybe you can make private money. I took notice of it when it went to 1,000. Then it crashed to $100. And I said, it's going to zero. It had its fun, right? It's over. And then it started trending back up. And I was watching it then. After it got to 1,000, I was watching it. It got to $400. And Cliff High, I was paying attention to Cliff High at the time, and Cliff High was talking about it.
I'm very familiar with Mr. High.
So I decided to do a deep dive, and I'm an IT guy, and I started as a computer programmer. My first 5 years of my career I was a full-time computer programmer. So I did a deep dive on it, and I spent an entire day just trying to understand how the transactions work. And it blew my mind how elegant it was. So it solved the general's problem, the Byzantine general's problem. And it literally blew my mind that That's how Bitcoin became about, was they solved this Byzantine Bitcoin. So they solved it by accident, basically. They had to figure out a way to prevent a double pay. So the first digital currency was something called DigiCash, and it was basically centralized, but plus they didn't solve the double pay problem. Well, so whoever figured out when they solved the double pay, they solved the Byzantine problem simultaneously. So it was very elegant software. I was impressed by that, how elegant it was. So it's basically anti-fragile software. How in the hell do you make something anti-fragile? They call it the honey badger. So it's been attacked left and right, but it always basically comes back to life. It's been up and running 12 plus years, 14 years at 99.9% because of this anti-fragility. And it's all because of this elegance in the software. So it's elegant as hell. So that got me really intrigued. And I'm looking at them going, and I'm analyzing this from kind of an investing standpoint, because I'm investing in gold and silver miners and I'm a speculator. I'm going, is this a decent investment? So then I looked at it and I said, okay, how does this thing die? How does it die? And that's the thing that really frustrated me to no end. I couldn't figure out how to kill this thing. And that really bothered me. It really bothered me. And then the third thing, the reason why I went out and bought it, this is 2016, it was at $400. The thing that got me to buy it was the halving. I'm going. And so when they created the halving, what the halving is every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that gets mined gets cut by 50%. Whack. So that means demand has to go up or else the price goes up. And so it has this upward pressure. And so that halving, I'm going, okay, you can't kill the thing. It's elegant as hell. It's secure. It's reliable. It's anti-fragile. And it has upward pressure on the price. So I'm like, I'm not an idiot. So I'm like, okay, I got to buy it because I couldn't find a reason not to. So I bought it, and I had a website at the time. So this is 2016, and I had a website, Gold Stock Data. And I told people, and when I had a blog in there, forum, and I basically told people to buy Bitcoin, $400. They're all gold people. Only like 2 or 3 guys did it, right? I think of the whole thing, and they all sold. I mean, every single one, all the guys that got in early, they got out. I mean, it was like the early people, not a single guy. I mean, it was crazy. Nobody was a believer. Now me, I was a believer from the very beginning. I was a believer because I couldn't figure out. So basically, I've been following this thing ever since in 2016, right? And you can't imagine the returns. You take $400 and you divide it by 200,000. That's my return. It's crazy. The return's absolutely crazy. And I'm still bullish. Now, I've figured out that there's 3 phases to Bitcoin. These are my phases, my personal phases. And this is the reason why you kind of have to own it until phase 2 ends. Now, phase 1 is ended. And phase 1 was your initial retail grassroots buyers, me, right? It's this initial phase, this initial wave upward. And I said that until you get to $50,000, you're in phase 1. And phase 1 is just grassroots. It's just kind of taking hold, slowly growing because of the halving. Every 4 years, it just has this upward trend. Now that's kind of your Ponzi type of thing, right? It's that Ponzi. What is the use case? And I'm going to tell you the number one use case for Bitcoin hasn't even started yet. So the use case for phase 1 is all Ponzi. And that's the reason why everybody stays away from it, because they don't see the value. But once you get to phase 2, which is what we're in right now, and phase 2 is when the institutional money comes in and the ETF money comes in. And phase 2 is going to take a while. Phase 2 is going to go all the way up to about 500,000. And by the time we get to 500,000, that's when you're going to have all your pension funds, your insurance companies, your governments, and everything's going to start to take hold. Now, the reason why Bitcoin is going to go through this phase 2, the reason why it's not going to zero anytime soon, is because of the altcoins. The altcoins are symbiotic for Bitcoin. And this is what the maxis miss. And I've been trying to get everybody to understand how potent these alts are. And the reason why the alts are so potent is because they're using second and third generation blockchain. And second and third generation blockchain they basically create a revolutionary, highly secure database that creates the opportunity to create applications. And the number one application for the alts is stablecoins. You can take a stable coin and you can back it by gold, you can back it by currencies, you can back it by treasuries, and suddenly you have the perfect currency because it's priced 24/7, it's stable, and you can. And the key here for phase 2 is when stable coins become fungible. Once stable coins become fungible, that creates a symbiotic relationship with Bitcoin. And this is what people miss. They don't understand this. They don't understand how this symbiotic relationship with these alts are. Now, the reason why we're going through this phase 2, once we get to $500,000, suddenly Bitcoin becomes the ultimate collateral. And this is the number one use case for Bitcoin. I've said from the very beginning that what makes Bitcoin valuable is because it's a collectible. And since it's a collectible, it's not money, it's not an asset, it's not a commodity, it's a collectible. It's unique in that regard. You can't clone it, you can't copy Bitcoin, and we'll go into why you can't. And so since it's a collectible, once it becomes somewhat stable, the volatility goes out, at that point in time, Bitcoin becomes the perfect collateral. Now, the perfect collateral for what? So if you use use a house, for instance, for a collateral, that house is a pain in the butt to sell. But if it's in a smart contract and it's priced 24/7, it's instantaneously moved. So if you go and buy a car, you go into a dealership. You can't do this now, but once we get towards the end of phase 2 and Bitcoin starts to become collateral, you go into a car dealership and you say, okay, I want to buy that $50,000 truck. And the guy goes, how are you going to buy it? And you go, I'm going to pay monthly payments on it, but I'm going to use Bitcoin as my collateral. So you put a $50,000 truck, you put $100,000 in Bitcoin in the smart contract, and that $50,000, that $100,000 stays there. It doesn't move, right? It doesn't move. And then you make the payments on the car, but it's locked in a smart contract, which the dealership owns. And the dealership at any time can take that $50,000 and pay that truck off the second you stop making payments. Or if Bitcoin drops in price, either one of those things happen. Or if the dealer can say, look, Bitcoin's down 30%, you better add Bitcoin immediately or I'm going to pay off that truck. So there's zero risk to the dealership. So this is called DeFi, and DeFi works on altcoins. DeFi doesn't work on Bitcoin. So it's all going to be built on alts. So once you get into phase 2, so this is this symbiotic relationship with Bitcoin and the alts. And this is what gives Bitcoin value. So you call it a Ponzi, it has no underlying value. Well, guess what? With this symbiotic relationship and the security and the anti-fragility and governments backing it, it sure does have value. It has a ton of value. And if you don't see that, you're blind. Now, I didn't really want to do this interview because I know I'm going to make you look bad because I understand this subject better than 1% of the people. I understand it inside and out. I've been doing it since 2016. So it's really hard to debate me because your argument doesn't hold water and it's going to really be obvious. But go ahead.
Okay, so for starters, the one thing that crushes any Ponzi and is what will crush the Bitcoin Ponzi is no new money in. Right now, today, if no new money goes into the Bitcoin Ponzi, then it will not grow. And then what happens, Don, is the last people in are going to be the first ones out because they're not making any money. And then as it continues to go down a little bit and no new money is coming in to keep it propped up, then the next level of people that got in that aren't making any money yet are going to bail because they're seeing that there are other opportunities that they can make a return on their investment. And then it'll begin to cascade and fall apart like every Ponzi does. So it's the new money in, which is what all Ponzi's have in common. And one thing for you to ponder, and when I get finished, I'll let you address it, but explain to me the revenue stream of the Bitcoin Ponzi. And remember, there's only one. And legitimate businesses and legitimate companies have multiple income streams. So one of the first things that people can look at to identify a Ponzi scheme is if they only have one revenue stream, and that's new money that comes into it. Nothing is done with that money except it inflates the value of the previous participants. There's no research and development. There's no employees being paid. There's no acquisitions being made. Nothing. It's just a big money vacuum. All right, so let me backtrack a second. You came to the right place to talk to a seeker. I happen to sleep under a copper pyramid that I constructed myself. I wear 2 Sri Yantras around my neck. I've been in AA for 41 years, sober and clean. So I've been on the spiritual path for a long time. And Dr. I believe it's Thomas Campbell, My Big Toe. Have you ever heard of him? Check out his interview. You're going to love it. Check out his interview with Joe Rogan, Dr. Thomas Campbell, and he wrote a book called My Big Toe. He's right up your alley. And I'm right up your alley too with all of the spiritual part. Okay, now, what I'm going to do is present a couple of visuals that will help state my case. All right, the first one is, and for a little background for you, most of the people who know me have heard me say this before, but in my past, I spent 10 years in multi-level marketing. I made an enormous amount of money in that. I'm a little bit of an odd duck too. Most people don't make any money in MLM. They get frustrated and quit, but I was able, it fit me like a glove. I was really good at it and I made a lot of money. Well, when you get successful in multi-level marketing, there are a lot of Ponzi schemes in MLM. So when you are successful, everybody and his brother that's in MLM is trying to pitch you their deal. Well, most of the time, they are Ponzi schemes. So I spent 10 years being able to hone my skill in being able to identify, recognize Ponzi schemes. And so that's the experience that I bring to looking at Bitcoin as a Ponzi scheme. And again, the first thing is if it's only got one revenue stream, new money in, you're about 90% there. All right. But I wanted to share a couple of other characteristics. All right. Now, the one thing I love about Grok, and Don, I'm sure you have discovered this, Grok and ChatGPT is not smart yet. They will catch up. But if you put, is Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme into Grok or ChatGPT, they're going to say no. But if you ask what are the main elements, and the thing I love the most about this visual is I asked for 3 and it gave me 4. So everybody trust but verify when you're using Grok and you're using ChatGPT. They are smart, but they're not very smart yet. They will improve, but trust but verify. Now, Don, in my estimation, there are 4 core elements to every Ponzi scheme. Now, there are other components that people can add, like a promise of an exact return. That can be added, and yes, that would be consistent with being a Ponzi scheme, but it's not necessary. The 4 core elements are as follows. Number 1, it takes in new money, investor deposits. Number 2, but Ripple does that, but they're not a Ponzi because they don't fit the other 3 while Bitcoin does. All right, the easiest way to understand number 2 and number 3, Don, is very simple. Bitcoin is not a business. It's code. It's computer code running. That is not a business. So, number 2, little or no legitimate business operations. If it's not a business, it cannot have any legitimate business operations. Number 3, little or no business profit or earnings. It's not a business. It can have no profit or earnings. And again, what the new money in the Bitcoin Ponzi does, Don, is one and only one thing. It inflates the value of the people who are already in it. Once again, there's no R&D. There's no new product being offered and sold. There's nothing, no acquisitions to expand their business reach. No nothing. It just expands, inflates the value of the people who were in it previously. And that's number 4. The source of returns to investors is from cash received from new investors. Now, the wording, if somebody wanted to get very technical and say it's not cash received, it's not, look, it's new money in, and it is inflating the value of the previous participants. And that is the only thing that makes the Bitcoin Ponzi grow. And Don, new money in is absolutely the only thing that makes Ponzi schemes grow. There is no other revenue stream. And sometimes people like to say, well, Ripple is a Ponzi scheme as well. Well, they just spent $1.25 billion on an acquisition with Hidden Road. They just struck a deal with another company, Circle, where now Circle is going to have their stable coin on the XRP ledger. And none of these things happen on the Bitcoin core network because you can't change any of the code. Now, the positive end of that people are going to argue, you can't use it for anything, you can't adapt, but they're going to say, but it's so secure. Well, Ripple has been in existence, the XRPL has been in existence 13 years, never been hacked. So if you're the most secure, but nobody uses it, you can't use it for anything, you can't build on top of it, what good is it if it is so secure at that cost, at the cost of being able to add anything to the network? So those are the 4 points. And one other thing I wanted to say, and then I'll give you a chance to respond. All right, this is my example with Grok. Okay, if you put in Grok, is Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme? It's going to tell you no. I've done it. And a lot of the Bitcoin maxis that I have tried to have these conversations with try to bring that up. Oh, well, Grok says it's not a Ponzi. You're an idiot. Well, Grok is not very smart yet. It's learning. So, Don, and I think you can, I really believe that you're going to appreciate this. If you describe to Grok the function of what a Ponzi does, it says yes. So if a project's only function is to take in new money and that inflates early investors' value from their investment, is that a Ponzi scheme? And the answer from Grok is yes. That if the sole function is to bring in new money, then that's exactly what it is. So I'm trying to help educate people as well, Don, just as you are. I'm trying to help people understand Grok. It ain't there yet, people. It will be. But make sure that you trust and verify and find some human that has got a depth of experience in the topic that you're trying to learn about, and make sure that you get accurate answers from a human until Grok catches up to us. And yes, they will. I don't know, it'll be next week maybe, but they ain't caught us yet. All right, so I'll take a breath and let you respond.
Okay, so Bitcoin is analogous to a collectible. So the way that I look at it is a Wayne Gretzky card. So the people that own Wayne Gretzky cards, just a few rookie cards, the people that own them, it's not a Ponzi. They own a Wayne Gretzky card. The question is how long will the Wayne Gretzky card go up in value or down in value? That's the way you need to look at Bitcoin. Is Bitcoin a Wayne Gretzky card? Does it have value? And how much value does it have? Is that value going up, or is that value going down? Now, I agree with you completely that there's no money going in, it goes down. Bitcoin is based on supply demand. Same thing as a Wayne Gretzky rookie card. It's based on supply demand, no difference. The question is it perceived to have value or does it not have perceived to be value? That's all it comes down to. Now, in phase one and phase two, you're going to get the perception of value. So what we're trying to identify here, what's happening today in the marketplace is how valuable do people think it is? And so I think it's going to go higher until we get to that point. So until phase two completes, you're going to have more money going in. So you got more money going in, then it goes up in value. Plus, every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that's created, as we speak today, the daily amount of Bitcoin that's created is $47 million, which is peanuts when you have a billionaire that wants, if you take $47 million and divide it by a billion, if you will, they're going to be, the only place that they can buy the Bitcoin is from other people. So the whales are steadily collecting Bitcoin from other people. And so you have more buyers and sellers in phase one and phase two. Now, here's the argument that you really need to be making if you really understand what's kind of happening with Bitcoin is don't look at it from a Ponzi scheme standpoint. Look at it from a standpoint of why it has value today, because a true Ponzi is an illegitimate business that really doesn't have any increasing assets. It's illegitimate.
And Bitcoin has none. And Don, the way it would be probably serve you better to say the way that I look at it instead of saying the way that I need to look at it. I know exactly how I'm looking at it. And I know beyond a shadow of any doubt that it is not a business. It is code. It's not a baseball card with made up value that people that own the baseball card have. It's code.
It doesn't have to be.
And what I am saying is that the function of the Bitcoin network is the code running, and the value is not what people think it is. It is simply this. Michael Saylor decides he's going to buy $2 billion more worth of Bitcoin on Monday. Jane bought into the Bitcoin Ponzi on Sunday, and I'm just going to use a round number, at $85,000 a Bitcoin. So Saylor buys $2 billion worth of Bitcoin on Monday. Jane wakes up on Tuesday, and the value of her Bitcoin has absolutely nothing to do with what she thinks or anybody else thinks about the value of Bitcoin. The only thing that made that number go up, and let's say that it increased it to 87,000, was the additional money that the lunatic Saylor put in it. So you're not making a very good argument.
Right, but write these down, because I'm still replying to you. What you said, so I'm not done yet.
Okay.
So yeah. So but wait, one thing that so I'm looking at it. I'm trying to reply to what you said. So as far as a Ponzi, if you look at Bitcoin from a Ponzi standpoint, every Ponzi in history was basically, it wasn't a real business. It was illegitimate, right? It was a fake business, and they're basically conning you into giving them money, right? Bitcoin.
Don, you're changing the definition of what a Ponzi is to add illegitimate to it and a business.
Right. It says right there, no legitimate buclegitimate.
Bitcoin isn't a business, so it can't be legitimate or not legitimate.
Well, let's clear that off.
True.
Let me
Go ahead,
speak.
spit it out. That's true.
Right. Let me speak, please.
Okay.
Okay. So if we look at what a Ponzi is, it's basically, in my opinion, the number one core. If you look at all Ponzi's historically, big Ponzi's, right? They were illegitimate businesses, right? And so if you look at what Bitcoin represents, when I say illegitimate, I mean basically no value. There's nothing there. All they're doing is stealing people's money. What I'm saying is that if that was true, then Bitcoin would not have all of these fundamental underlying values. And now I want to get to this thing about no money in, no money out. And I absolutely agree with you. It's the no money in, the no money out is Bitcoin's weakness. And it's based on supply demand on a 24/7 basis. And the minute that supply overwhelms demand, Bitcoin has a big problem, right? And so that's the one thing that a lot of people are very concerned about, is that at a certain point in time, people are going to recognize that it doesn't have any more value to go higher, right? And so the question is, when do you reach that level? And what I tried to explain in my opening remarks was that once you get to phase 3, and we're not going to get to phase 3. Once you get to phase 3, that's when all of the big players are in. And so phase 2 is your final adoption period. It's your final adoption period we're in now, where you have businesses, insurance companies, hedge funds, governments, even central banks basically accumulating Bitcoin. And that's what we're in now. But that's phase 2. And the reason why they're accumulating it is because and this is where it gets really interesting around what is Bitcoin and what is it not. Bitcoin there's never been an asset like this that ever existed in mankind. So we don't understand the fact that we can have peer-to-peer, we can exchange, we can have ownership of a file. And that's all a Bitcoin is. It's basically a file that I own with a key. The file with a key. The fact that I can own a file, I'm the only person, only me, there's no double spend. I'm the only person. It only goes into one wallet, and that wallet, I have the key to it. So I'm the only person on the planet that owns this file. We do not know how valuable that is because we've never, ever had an asset like this before. So this is phase 3. And so when we get to phase 3, at phase 3, once you have all the adoption, so the adoption is what pushes it up. The adoption pushes it. And then once the adoption is finished, that's the end of phase 2. Once the adoption is finished, at that point in time, Bitcoin has to show its colors. You talked about a business not having any revenue. But in addition to revenue, one of the things that the Bitcoin's a little unique animal, it has to have value. And that's what businesses have to offer. They have to offer value. So what is Bitcoin going to offer in phase 3 that keeps the price up? Now, Michael Saylor says it's going to go to 10 million. I'd say that's BS, because once phase 2 is finished, there's no way that it's just going to keep going up, because once you have full adoption, it's almost impossible for the drivers. So what's driving Bitcoin today? What's driving Bitcoin today is adoption. And once you get full adoption, at that point, it's going to be really, really hard to keep pushing it up, other than the halving. So I think in phase 3, that's where I mentioned this earlier, that's where the alts come into play. The alts are going to create this symbiotic relationship that keeps Bitcoin at a certain level. Now, we don't know what that level is going to be. Is it going to be 500,000? Is it going to be 1 million? Is it going to be 2 million? Now, you like XRP, and I'm telling you, the reason why XRP is going to succeed is because of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going to create all this money that comes into the crypto space when it goes to 500,000, 750,000, 1 million. All that money that gets sucked into Bitcoin, that's going to be sucked into stable coins. It's going to suck into alts, and it's going to create. I've said this. I've said it on Twitter that the alts are going to be worth more than Bitcoin. The alts is a combination because the alts are software applications. And so that symbiotic relationship is going to push everything higher. But if you think that Bitcoin is going to zero and all these alts are going to go to the moon, I think that's not true. Now, I don't know how high Bitcoin is going to go, but it's going to go higher and it's going to create a certain level. Now, phase 3 creates a lot of uncertainty because in phase 3, Bitcoin has, I'll say this and you can talk. Phase 3 has 3 use cases. Use case number 1 is store of value, which is what everybody's doing right now. That's the reason. It's investment. You're going to make more money. The second one is collateral, which I think is going to take off at the end of phase 2. And then the third one is transactions, which I don't think will ever happen because you don't spend something that goes up in value. Now, eventually people will spend that money. And that's the problem with phase 3, because once Bitcoin gets to a certain level, if it doesn't keep going higher, all these hodlers are going to start selling. And that's when you're going to get true value. That's when the value is going to hit. But the symbiotic relationship with the alts is going to keep Bitcoin from going to zero. But you are going to hit that phase 3 when the hodlers start selling. For instance, myself. Now, I said I would let you talk, so I will. Go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, no one is using Bitcoin for peer-to-peer payments. Satoshi's vision failed because the tech doesn't scale. Now, I don't know if you're familiar or not with David Schwartz and with how Ripple came together. Do you know much about that, Don?
A little bit, but I don't want to talk about it.
Okay, well, it's important. It's important to talk about. All right. The reason
we're talking about a Bitcoin Ponzi scheme. We're not talking about Ripple.
I understand, but you brought up a store of value, and I'm going to crush that. The reason that XRP came into being was it was developed by Bitcoin developers to create a better Bitcoin. Because when a first mover jumps out into the marketplace, they don't know what they don't know. And Satoshi didn't know that his peer-to-peer payment option was not going to work because his tech didn't scale. So Ripple XRP was designed by Bitcoin developers, and they had 3 things in mind. Number one, they wanted to make it faster because you need to have fast payments. If we're creating something that's slower than Swift, we're not really creating a solution. Number 2, they wanted to have a lower cost. Once again, the fees with transactions in our payment network across the world is what we're looking for a solution for. And then the third thing is they wanted to make it a deflationary asset, not a set supply. And I'm glad that you brought up a set supply, 21 million. Well, because it's scarcity, you're bringing scarcity into play. Okay, so Don, one thing we've got to try to set aside everything we think we know so we can understand something from a different angle. So I'm asking you to set aside everything you think you know about the Bitcoin being a store of value and think about it from another angle. If you and I could start today, would we design it to deflate instead of being a set supply? Because as it becomes less scarce, the value goes up. And that's what they did with XRP. Every time XRP is used, a little of it goes away. Every time the stable coin is used on the XRP ledger, a little of it goes away. They just did a deal with Circle with their stable coin. People use it on the XRP ledger. A little bit of XRP is going to be burned. So my counters to you is, yes, I understand the aspect of scarcity. My counter to you is that a decreasing supply of a valued asset whoops the shit out of a set supply.
Right.
And the only way that Bitcoin decreases is when dumb idiots lose their keys.
Right.
I don't think that is an elegant strategy for scarcity.
Right. But what we're talking about here is Bitcoin. This is a Ponzi scheme, and Ponzi scheme means Bitcoin is going to zero. Because when a Ponzi
No. I never said that. I do not, under any circumstances, believe that Bitcoin will go to zero. Sail and Sailor will never sell his Bitcoin. Never, no matter what happens.
If it is a Ponzi, it goes to zero because that's what Ponzi.
No. It just means that no new money is going to go into it, and a lot of people are going to sell.
Well, that's my thesis. My thesis. Wait. We agree. That's my thesis.
Okay, then you had a misunderstanding of a Ponzi scheme.
Yes. Wait. We got to clear this up right now.
Okay.
My thesis. I don't see Bitcoin as a store of value. I said that is the current use case that's used today for Bitcoin as a store of value, right? My thesis is that phase 1 and phase 2 is adoption, which pushes the price up. But it's not a store of value. I mean, if you look at all the definitions, my thesis is exactly what you just said. You get to phase 3. Once you get to phase 3, it stops going up. It basically hits a wall because you have more buyers and more sellers, and it becomes collateral. It becomes basically a stable coin. So
okay,
we're in agreement. We're in agreement.
Let me ask you a question. Right now, do you believe that people, if we could get AI to figure it out for us and we could track the last 10,000 Bitcoin speculator buyers, did they buy because they felt like number was going to go up, or did they buy because they feel like eventually it's going to get to phase 2 and phase 3, and then I'm not going to have to sell it?
Nobody agreed. I made up this phase 3 thing. Nobody agrees with me on it. They think I'm nuts. But I
don't. That's not the part that I disagree with you on. I can see how you're making sense out of that. But my point is, what is it right now? Not what is it going to be if stage 2 and stage 3 happen. What is it right now?
Okay, so
does it? Right. Let me finish the question. Yeah. How does it function? Not your belief of how it is functioning. How does it function? New money comes in and it inflates the value of previous participants. That is a textbook definition of a Ponzi scheme.
Right. Well, so what Bitcoin has going for it, which no Ponzi scheme will ever have going for it, is this idea of collateral. And that's where these alts come into play. And I mentioned this, that they're symbiotic. Bitcoin is the perfect collateral because of it's not deflationary, but it is secure. And it is rare. So it creates this perfect symbiotic relationship with the alts. So what's going to happen is, okay, let me give you an example. So I stopped buying Bitcoin at $1,000 and I started buying alts. I started buying alts because I saw that alts were the future, because Bitcoin is the first generation blockchain. And it's going to be the future. So I'm still buying alts. I believe my first alt was Ethereum, right? And I think Ethereum is going to do really well. And it's because of this symbiotic relationship. Well, I hear you. I hear everybody has their own choices, right? Everybody can invest in whatever they want to. But my point is that what we disagree on is I believe that Bitcoin has a symbiotic relationship with the alts, and that collateral will make Bitcoin survive. All we have to do is look at what the trends are today. The U.S. government is getting ready to pass the Genius Act, which is basically going to allow these stable coins to buy treasuries, and they're buying this is the first step of making these stable coins fungible. And once they become fungible, all these projects are going to thrive. And like I said, I think Bitcoin, my target for Bitcoin is $1 million, but I think that somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million, 500,000 and 2 million, somewhere in there, I think Bitcoin's going to have a problem. That's when phase 3 is basically going to raise its head and say, there's no more adoption here. It's like, and so you're going to have people selling. And once people start selling, it's going to get volatile. But I still think that as the use case, the number one use case, it's never going to be transactions. You mentioned that Bitcoin was never good at transactions. And I've always said that. We're not going to spend our Bitcoin. We're going to spend our stable coins.
Right.
And this is a problem for XRP, by the way, because I think we're going to use stable coins. We won't use XRP for transactions. We'll use stable coins. And XRP is not a good investment because its competition is stable coins.
I can address that. Do you believe that the XRP ledger is going to have a lot of stable coins on the XRP ledger?
I don't.
They've already got 5. They just added Circle. They've got to have a network to run on.
I agree. I agree, but I don't think it's the XRP.
Now, Don, were you aware that XRP is burned when the stable coins are used on the XRP ledger? See, my friend, it doesn't make a difference if it's XRP or if it's stable coins used on the XRP ledger. The point is XRP being used because that brings down the supply and makes the value go up.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that that's not a possibility. It is. You have a thesis that definitely carries water.
No, I have a fact that the XRP.
But we're early innings now. We don't know who's going to dominate these blockchains, right? We don't know who's going to dominate. So the place that I started investing 2016, 2017 was in the blockchain development platforms. You just laid it out beautifully. You said which blockchain is XRP, are these stable coins going to run on, right? And I believe that is where the value is in the future. I think those are going to be the $1 trillion companies, are the platforms. I mean, if we look at Microsoft today, it's the largest software company and it's worth more than $1 trillion. Well, the companies that control these smart contracts and these blockchains are going to be worth a fortune. So I've been investing in those because I don't know who the winners are going to be.
Right.
I believe that Bitcoin is going to hit a ceiling, and the alts are just going to keep going up. And we don't know which of these development platforms are going to do the best. I would
agree with that. Now, I did have another question. I did have another question since you brought it up. Are you familiar? And see, one of the unique things about people in the XRP Army community, family, whatever you want to call it, we've been through the ringer. We're the ones that got sued by the SEC while Ethereum and Bitcoin got a regulatory free pass. On a scale of 1 to 10, and I'm just asking for me to be able to understand where your understanding is. Don, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your understanding of ETHgate?
Of what?
ETHgate.
ETHgate. 0. I haven't heard of ETHgate.
Okay. I'm going to send you a link after we finish talking about a documentary that will explain it all to you. It's behind a paywall. It costs $10. I will give you the $10 if you watch that and continue this conversation with me, because if people are looking at Ethereum and don't understand the backstory, I'm willing to bet you $10 after you watch that documentary, you're going to sell every Ethereum that you own and don't want to have anything to do with them, because they are some of the worst scumbags in the history of the space. You have no idea what those people did. And I think once you do, being a spiritual person as you are, you'll want to be as far away from them as you possibly can, just as I do. You will not believe what they did.
Yeah, well, I have to say this because it's true. So I forget which year it was, 2017 or 2018. XRP was at 15 cents and I wanted to buy it. I mean, I really did. I knew it was going higher. I knew it was ridiculously cheap. And I wanted to buy it so bad. And I did my research. And from a spiritual standpoint, it made me sick to my stomach what the founders were doing. They were printing it like just absolutely like just bonkers and just keep it. They're basically printing it for themselves. And today, all that printing they did back in 2017, 18, 19, 20, they have it. They still have it. And so if you look at the percentage that the founders own of XRP, it really just put a bad taste in my mouth. And so I didn't buy it at 15 cents and I never have.
Right. And Don, can I help you with that?
Sure.
Okay. There was one coin and it didn't fly, but they created 100 billion of their tokens. And then the Ripple guys came up and one coin gifted that, and they changed the name to XRP. So Ripple has never printed their own token.
They sure did back then. They were printing it. They were printing like nuts. That's
Don,
BS,
it's all pre-mined. Don,
tell me I wasn't
all pre-mined.
I lived through that. What are you talking about? They printed it.
Google it. It was the founders pre-mined. All pre-mined.
No, they were printing it. They were printing it. I lived through that era. I was there.
Well, you missed something because you didn't look at it. It was pre-mined. You can Google it. It was all pre-mined. Let me finish and then you can respond. Let me finish and then you can respond.
Keeping it.
There's 100 billion XRP in existence, and that's the total supply, except it deflates. Ripple is the custodian.
And how much do the founders hold?
Let me finish. Ripple is the custodian. They don't own it. They are the custodian. It is released monthly, $1 billion a month on a cryptographically controlled release. And what happens is Ripple keeps about 200 million a month, and then they put 800 million back into the escrow. So they're not dumping on retail. That's one of the most ridiculous things that Bitcoiners love to talk about, but they're factually incorrect. What Ripple wants XRP to do fantastically well. They're going against their own best interest if they tried to dump it on the market. And there's absolutely no reason for them to do that. They just bought a new company called Hidden Roads, $1.25 billion acquisition that they made. You didn't see that they sold a whole bunch of XRP to pay for it. They don't need to. They're a cash-rich company. They're making money. They don't need to do that. And Don, I promise you, if you Google at the end of our conversation, was the 100 billion supply of XRP all pre-mined, the answer that you're going to get is yes. They didn't print any new anywhere. They can't. I promise you, if you will Google that, it was 100% pre-mined, 100 billion of them.
I'm checking.
Good. They don't make any new XRP. They don't need it. And they have some in the escrow, but they can't just grab 10 billion of it tomorrow if they wanted to, because it's all locked up in the escrow.
Right. So you have, one second.
Learned something, didn't you?
Yeah, because I lived through that, and I remember there was lots of stuff coming out that they printed more. Okay, so
yeah, from people who didn't know what they were talking about, Don.
Right. Okay, so you have 100 billion. That's what it says, but
correct.
Half of that is held by Ripple Labs, and Ripple Labs,
in a cryptographically secure escrow.
Right.
It's released $1 billion. It's released $1 billion a month. Right. And they on average, Don, have put back 800 million of it every month. If they wanted to dump on anybody, they've got $1 billion a month. Why aren't they doing that?
Right. And the three founders hold like 15 billion XRP.
How much Microsoft does Bill Gates own?
Yeah, but that was Microsoft. Right. It was bad form then.
I mean, that's Microsoft. That's business. The founders get a part of the business. Elon owns a whole lot of Tesla. Jeff Bezos owns a whole lot of Amazon. Right. So what?
Well, they
were the founders.
They can dump it whenever they want to as well.
Yeah, but they took the biggest risk. If they wanted to do that, they can do that all day long. But the circulating supply right now, I mean, the market cap in XRP is like $135 billion right now, Don. Do you really think if one of the founders that you're talking about, if they sold $500 million worth of XRP today, do you think that's going to make any difference in the price if the market cap is $135 billion? Right. No. Every one of the arguments that the Bitcoiners have against XRP are trash.
Hey, I'm all for people making money in investments. So I'm rooting for you. I want XRP to go to $50. I do. I want people to be successful. If XRP goes to $50, a lot of people are going to make a lot of money.
Including me.
I do not see it as a zero-sum game at all.
And one other thing that I hope I can clear up with you is that my definition of a Ponzi scheme, doesn't include anywhere, in any shape, in any way, and I'm the one with 10 years worth of experience in it, not some Yahoo tried to get educated by looking at Grok. I don't believe that Bitcoin is going to go to zero. It doesn't need to go to zero to make it qualify as a Ponzi scheme. It is a Ponzi scheme, Don, because of the way it functions. New money is the only revenue stream, period. It's just new money. And then the only thing that new money does is it inflates the value of the whole pot.
Right.
I mean,
what this really, yeah, right. But what this really comes down to is you don't think that Bitcoin, the individual Satoshis, really hold value. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So right now, the Bitcoin that I hold, you basically think, you're holding air, Don. You don't hold
no. The market is dictating it. But the point that I'm saying is that the new money stops going in, the value is going to go right to the toilet.
Maybe, we don't know, right? That's phase 3. When phase 3, once we get to phase 3, but I don't think for a second we're not going to get to phase 3.
But see, Don, you are a very special spiritual seeker guy, and that's what I like about you. But the thing that you got to try to wrap your head around is the average Bitcoin holder is not you. They're going to look at it and say, I bought this shit at $5,000. And if I'm not making money with it, I'm going to sell it and go put it into something that I can.
Well, one of the things one of the reasons I'm here today is I'm trying to get people to diversify out of Bitcoin and also do alts, because I think that alts are going to outperform Bitcoin.
Well, and Don, one thing, right now, my dollar cost average in XRP is 25 cents. So it's $2.19 now. So I'm up somewhere around 9%. I'm retired. I don't need the money. All of my crypto money is FU money. I'm blessed. All right. But I've done well with it. I've outperformed the stock market with just what it's done so far. And there are, depending on the number, some say 12, some say 18 or 20 ETFs that are getting ready to go into XRP. Once those are funded, I've got a great video that the guy does the math. So there's a logical way that he comes up with the number. He says that XRP is going to go to $33 just based on the ETF money coming in.
Right.
And then if you look at what Hidden Road does, you know what Hidden Road does? Swap derivatives. You know how big the derivative market is? $2.5 quadrillion.
2,000
okay,
trillion.
now think about it. Those swaps done on the XRP ledger, and every time a swap is executed, XRP is burned. I'm telling you, there's something to this deflationary supply that a set supply doesn't have. Bitcoin would be better if you could burn it with a transaction. It would induce people to use it for transactions, and it would decrease the whole supply. That's a better Bitcoin. That's what the XRP developers, and they were Bitcoin developers, that's what they set out to do when they designed Ripple and XRP, a better Bitcoin.
Right. But it's apples and oranges. They're not the same thing.
How is it? Why can I not look? Okay, here's number one. You're correct. Ripple didn't fail at payments like Bitcoin did. And you can use, and why can't I use, let me finish. Why can't I use XRP as a store of value? I've been storing my value since 25 cents, and now it's $2.19. Exactly. I'd say that's a pretty good store of value.
Exactly. That's why cryptos are not stored of values; they're investments. Yeah.
Okay. And Don, the underlying business, and the underlying business is growing, right? Ripple is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The Bitcoin Ponzi network is doing nothing.
Right.
They're not. There's no new innovation. There's no nothing.
I know, that's the reason why I like the alts. But let's talk about apples and oranges here. I was going to come back to this, the reason why you can't clone Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is this unique animal that was created. Bitcoin shouldn't exist. It's the only one that's just this really, really strange animal. So the way that it was created was Satoshi put this white paper out on the internet and said, "Hey, look at this. This is pretty cool." And then he wrote the software for the miners and the nodes and put that up on GitHub when GitHub was pretty small. Now GitHub's huge. And said, "Okay, download this software and start using it," right? And then Bitcoin started mining the Bitcoin, and he mined over 1 million of them. And then after it was up and running, he disappeared. I mean, gone. And by doing that, nobody else has even attempted this, right? By disappearing, by leaving, what he basically did was create a decentralized governance model. And this is what makes Bitcoin unique and why you can't clone it, because you can't create a decentralized governance model. So there's basically it's a vacuum. It doesn't exist. There's no governance model. It doesn't exist. So the only way that you can update Bitcoin is through consensus. And so the way the consensus works is you got to get 51% of people to put the software on. You got to have, if you get 51%, you can change the code, anybody.
Right.
So anybody can come up, it's open source software. So anybody can make a change to Bitcoin, but you got to get 51% to install it, right?
And Don, were you aware that David Schwartz, who is the CTO of Ripple, were you aware that he decided to use the Federated Byzantine Agreement as Ripple's protocol? It is a consensus mechanism, but you have to have an 80% consensus. Right. That's how they got over the double spend problem.
Oh, right, you're right. But here's the thing, though. The problem with cloning Bitcoin, it's a two-pronged thing. So prong number one is the decentralization of updating the software, which you just said. Other people can create these decentralized governance models, like 80%. Correct. Right? Correct. You can create them. A governance model is just an agreement, right? 80%. And 80% sounds like a very difficult threshold, right?
And it is.
It sounds like one, absolutely. But where Bitcoin has this second prong, if you will, is its size, its massiveness, right?
Stupidity.
So money cannot overwhelm Bitcoin. You can't. I don't care how rich you are. You could be a trillionaire.
But people can stop buying it.
Right. No, I'm talking about governance model, about changing the code.
I get that, but it still can be stopped if people stop buying it. And let me interject. Let me interject one thing real quick.
I didn't finish about the governance model. My point.
Okay.
This is what makes Bitcoin, where you can't clone the thing, is that it's so massive in size that it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter. You could be a trillionaire, right? Musk, I don't care. Musk could go out there and try to buy all the programmers he could. He could buy them all out, right? But it's too big. And that's the problem. That's the reason why the Bitcoin consensus model, it has a security behind it where nobody can mess with it. Whereas Ripple or Ethereum or Solana, any of these other big projects, I guarantee you with enough money, you can change that code. You can't change the code with Bitcoin, but with enough money, you could change, I think, enough power. Enough people could get behind it. It's not typical today, as of today, I don't care if it has an 80% model. If people with power behind it, that's why you have all of these foundations. These foundations, like Ethereum is controlled by the foundation, Litecoin is controlled by the foundation. Even Hoskins at Cardano, he's broken into 3 groups. Cardano has 3 separate groups, and they're saying we're decentralized because we have 3 groups, right? It's BS. If somebody has enough power, until you get big enough where you can't defend it, where people can't get in somehow, but Bitcoin is the one model that people trust because there's good luck changing the code.
I get it. Okay, but Don, let me ask you something. If Bitcoin, and I don't know the exact date, but let's say it's 15 years. Ripple has been in business for 13. They've never been hacked. They are faster. they are lower cost for transactions, and the supply is deflationary. Now, why?
what about
Let me finish. Bitcoin failed as a peer-to-peer payment option. Why in the world would any idiot want to copy it? It failed for its intended purpose.
Right. It absolutely failed. And
I know.
said, he did not create what did he call it? A digital cash peer-to-peer network.
Or a value. He'd be rolling over in his grave if he saw what Michael Saylor is starting his invention into.
Right. He wanted to create a digital cash cryptocurrency. That's what he wanted to create. But what he created,
payment network.
That's what he wanted to create. But what he actually created was a collectible. And the pizza purchase where they used 10,000 Bitcoins.
I saw that too.
10,000 Bitcoins to buy one pizza.
I know. Don, the first crypto I bought was Bitcoin. I know the whole Bitcoin story.
Well, that tells you, right? That tells you you don't spend your Bitcoin. That was the lesson we all learned, right? So Bitcoin is not a transactional currency, and it's not a store of value. But what it is a collateral. It's a collectible that can be used as a collateral, and it will be used. Now the question is, how big will Bitcoin go? And I think it'll get to 1 million.
And I don't think it'll go to 0, but I don't think it's going to continue to do what it has been. All right. So, Rick, are you trying to give us a timing out?
Well, I've been watching this. It's a very, very quite interesting and very complex debate. I think each of these sides have some merits to them.
I'll be right back.
You can talk.
I understand that Don has some great merits on some various levels of Bitcoin when they're reached. And he agrees that in level 3, it might be a suspect of time to get out. No, Scott is pretty strong on his level of belief that, again, very tough to use the word Ponzi scheme. And
not for me.
Not for you, but it does meet some of the definitions of it. But I have to say, you guys had a fantastic debate. You probably can go on for hours.
Well, we could always do a round 2 because I'd love for Don to check out Rigged and give me some feedback on what he found out in that documentary.
But I do think this was an excellent debate, understanding both sides of it from an outsider, just looking here and watching. And I think I want to say thank you for Don. Thank you for Scott. You guys did a great job. And I think the bottom line is investigate, learn, and do due diligence on investing in anything in crypto.
Yeah, I just have one closing comment to make.
Yep, please.
And that closing comment is that there's still tons of unknowns here on crypto. So we don't really know. All you can do is it's a speculative investment. You're speculating. You don't know the future. I always say only investment you can afford to lose. But as far as Bitcoin goes, I could be wrong about my phase 3 thesis, and Michael Saylor could be right. And he's going to his is like 10 million plus. But I don't see that. For me, what's driving Bitcoin today, that driver, which is mass adoption, right? You got tons of money coming in, right? At a certain point, I think that comes to an end, that massive adoption. I think that'll happen over the next 2 years. And then what, right? I think we're going to get to that then what phase. I really do. But the altcoins, and again, they're all risky. I believe the altcoins are going to build some type of private financial system. And if they can integrate in, and that's kind of what this Genius Act is trying to do, they can integrate in with the financial system, then you're going to have you're going to have private money, you're going to have public money, then they're going to both work together. And what that does, that opens the door to decentralized finance, which I think is potentially going to be the biggest area. Stable coins.
No, I agree.
Stable coins and decentralized finance, I think, are both going to be huge. And so that's why I love it as an investment for that. So let me
No,
thanks for the
I
closing
agree with what you're
comments.
saying. And the phase three, I think, is what Scott is alluding to, where this might be maybe using the wrong word, collapse, but
Right.
definitely a decrease in the value, because phase three is you have all your investors, and then what's going to happen then?
Right. Yeah.
Well, I I can articulate my position a little better than that. Although I
Go ahead.
appreciate that, Rick. My my concern is the functionality of it right now. Not phase two, not phase three, not phase whatever. What is the functionality? And the pure function is the code is running. And what it does is it takes in new money and then it disperses it and inflates the value of the other people that are in it. That is a Ponzi scheme.
Right,
You can
Scott.
mess it up with all other kinds of stuff and
You were
all other kinds of beliefs if you want
yes.
to, but you can't change the basic fundamentals of how the thing functions.
Right.
I think if I can interject for a moment, I'm
Yeah.
not sure that Don disagrees with that, but
Right.
again, phase one, phase two, great opportunity. Phase three, maybe look out.
Yeah, but the other thing about as we are today, he's kind of right because we're not using it for transactions. So the only thing we're really using it for is this idea of store of value. We're right, and Scott is right. He's like, wait a minute, why does it have a store of value? What's that underlying value? Right? It's not really showing its face yet. And what I'm saying is that, and once you get to the end of phase two, collateral starts to kick into gear.
Or maybe kicks into gear.
Yeah, maybe, right. Absolutely, maybe.
If not,
it has the
then you
potential.
look back on Scott
You're
and
right.
say,
So
well,
there's two,
maybe
right.
we should listen to him.
Yeah,
and maybe
absolutely.
we should get out before phase two ends.
Right. So there's two pieces of this collateral thing and this is where the revenue comes in, is that there's a very good possibility that people that own Bitcoin, because it's an asset, you'll be able to borrow, you'll be able to loan it out. So for instance, gold, you can loan out your gold, but it's not liquid. It's not priced 24/7. So I believe that the one thing that's going to keep Bitcoin elevated in value is this idea that it creates a revenue stream. That since it's an asset, I can loan it out to people. I go, oh, here's my Bitcoin. You can have it, but it's going to go into a smart contract. Then he can borrow against that and get some cash.
But
and
I can do the same
Well,
thing.
hang on, let me interject.
I can
That's
do the
not
same thing with
a
XRP.
loan. That's not a loan to Bitcoin, because
No.
I have known people that have other assets outside of Bitcoin that use that exact tactics to enhance his overall net worth to borrow against, because he owned it. But Bitcoin is not the only one that does that.
Absolutely, but Bitcoin, since you can price it 24/7 and it's transaction.
Well, you can price any crypto 24/7.
Right. You can do this with any crypto, but Bitcoin, but Bitcoin has this ability. The other ones have it as well. But my point is that, like right now, I have some Bitcoin. Right, at a certain point, somebody's going to go, look, Don, I'll give you 3% or 4% if you
Exactly.
And I'm like, oh, okay. And if it goes into a smart contract and the only place it can go is back to me, I'm like, oh, all right, sign me up. I'll do it.
Absolutely.
And so DeFi is not going to be unique. DeFi is not going to be unique.
I think
that's going to be unique to Bitcoin, Don. I can do that with XRP.
Hold on. Don's not disagreeing that it's not unique to Bitcoin.
Right.
It could be, Ethereum, which I know, Scott, that you're not favorite of. It could be XRP, or it could be any stock, any crypto
I'm
that
saying
has a value today.
Yes, I'm saying that could be a reason why Bitcoin doesn't crash.
Okay.
And it can hold Bitcoin up. There's going to have to be something that holds it up.
Right. And I want to preface by saying, and again, I'm an independent just listening. Scott doesn't believe that Bitcoin is going to zero.
Right.
Correct.
In your terms, stage 3, it's a warning. Where is it going to go? Nobody knows.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. All right, Scott, I'm going to bail out. You guys can
Me
talk
too.
or finish
Take
your
care,
other way.
Don. I'll send you a link to Rig. I hope you'll watch it and get back to me.
All right, guys. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate
Take
it. It was
care.
good. It was a good one.
Yes, it was. Take care.